Right then, let's go. Hello, and welcome to another episode of 2-on-1, the Powerchair Football podcast, powered by MK Batteries. I'm delighted once again to be joined by Mr. Ryan Sipple. Ryan, how you doing?
Not bad at all, Alex. How are you?
Looking forward to this episode a lot. What a weekend we've just had.
Indeed. And before we get on to that, I just want to say a huge thank you to our sponsors, MK Battery, a long-standing supporter of Powerchair Football, working closely with the WFA to provide the essential batteries that power our sport. Their dedication goes beyond just equipment. They've played a pivotal role in the development of Powerchair Football, helping to fuel its growth and success across all levels. Now, this episode, Alex and I will be recapping all of the action from the opening weekend of the 24-25 Optegra Premiership, and what a weekend it was, don't you think, Al?
I think it's probably the best opening weekend to a Premiership I've ever seen. And bar, I think, the final weekends where we've had some dramatic finishes to the league, probably the best Premiership weekend I've seen. Some unreal football, some incredible results, some tremendous progress made by individuals and teams, and a setup what promises to be the most exciting Premiership week or season, we've had for a long time.
Yeah, I think you've just got to look at the table to see how competitive and intriguing it is. We got on a podcast a few weeks ago to cast our predictions ahead for things such as the champions, top goal scorers, teams to watch, etc. And within that, we openly acknowledged that it could be a 4, 5, 6 horse race, and it's unfolding to be exactly that. And I cannot wait for game week 2 already. It's fascinating stuff. And we'll no doubt get into this as the podcast unfolds, as we typically do these recaps. Alex and I both have the table up alongside us, and we'll go through each team, talk about key moments, results, and maybe cast our thoughts ahead for the remaining 4 weekends. Before we do, I just want to say a quick thank you to the commentators. So during a National League weekend, we stream all of our games live across YouTube. And this weekend we had Facebook as well. Anyone that watches Powerchair Football regularly will know how beneficial commentary is for the whole experience, in terms of talking through the play-by-play stuff and adding some real colour to what we think is already an incredible product and sport. So of the 26 games that were played across Game Week 1, 24 games had live match commentary. So a shout out individually: Greg Baxter, Rosie Hodgson, Charlie McClellan, Owen Swift, Barris Innell, Jack Humphreys, Dave Lewis, George Barnard, Dean Williams, and of course both of us. So firstly, a huge thank you to all of them. It's something we really want to give a lot of attention and focus going forward. So anyone that's interested in supporting our commentary, both across the Championship and Premiership, please reach out, and we will endeavour to recognise the top contributors at the conclusion of the season.
Big thanks to the team as well. They're all very positive and trying their hardest, and really enhancing the broadcast that we've managed to put together. So glad to make a big step forward in terms of percentage coverage. That's a good target to try and keep and exceed for the rest of the season. Well done you for organising, Ryan. I know you put a lot into that one.
Let's look at the 24-25 Optegra Premiership. We can see that Leeds Chariots are currently top of the table, 12 points from their opening 5 games. And anyone that's been keeping an eye on the WFO's social media pages, you'll see something that was released today. Leeds Chariots have joined the ranks of Aspire, West Brom and Northern Thunder as one of only 4 teams in history to top the Premiership after an opening weekend. So an incredible start. We have them as potential title contenders, and they have to be considered now.
They certainly do. Just before we get on to specifically Leeds, 2 big thank yous. First up, for that particular stat, Mr. Jeff Lewis, our head referee. We will come on to some further thank yous to him in a bit. And a little honourable mention to Brighton, who were joint top on points but second on goal difference once. Is that right? Have I got that right the way around?
Yep, I believe that is the case from what Jeff, the ref, has told me. Brighton narrowly missed out on goal difference once, but no one else has come close.
Fabulous. But let's get on to Leeds. Just incredible. Played 5, won 4, lost 1. Goal difference of plus 12 and 12 points. So they really started that season and that weekend with opening up with quite a pace. However, they were first up on the second up on the Saturday with what was really a really tough game, I would have thought, which was against Newcastle. And that's the game I would have thought, or one of the games I would have thought they would be looking like they might struggle in, but they looked solid. They did well. 1-1-0, 3 points in the bag. I think a draw there would have been really quite acceptable. But it wasn't until later on in the day, in the third game of the day against Teesside, where they came a cropper and lost 2-1. But the rest of their performances looked great. They moved the ball very quickly when they decide to go. Certainly, Dan Rigby is very clinical, clean hitter of the ball. And when he gets that right, that certainly changes the shape of play quite quickly.
I had the pleasure of commentating them in the first game against Newcastle. And Newcastle, a team that I have predicted that could go on and potentially lift the trophy. So an intriguing matchup to kick things off for both of their seasons. 2 things to mention within that one is the 2 players in which failed their speed test prior to the game kicking off, 1 apiece in terms of both teams suffering the dreaded speed test. Jack Britton of Leeds Chariots and Cole Simpson of Newcastle. The reason why I feel it was significant is the fact that Jack Britton, such a versatile player, typically utilised as the most offensive of the 4 players. It meant the Leeds Chariots had to alter. Whilst Lewis Harris predominantly wears that green goalkeeper jersey, he plays in the centre. So they had to stick Harris and Taylor in between the sticks, and he was absolutely superb. So full credit to him. And as you've already mentioned, as the weekend progressed, they looked really strong. Despite that 2-1 defeat to Teesside, they were very competitive. I remember talking about Leeds on the podcast last year following game week 1 of the 23-24 campaign, and this is when they'd just brought in Lewis Harris and Jack Maxwell, and was really excited about kind of the direction they were going in. And I think now they've got a season under their belt, they're really starting to establish a fantastic level of chemistry between them. We're going to see the fruit of that across the 24-25 campaign. Can they maintain that across the 5 weekends? We will see, but it's a fantastic start nonetheless. Russ Rigby now replaced Paul Gorman, no doubt supported by the expertise of Dan Rigby and Lewis Harris. Lewis Harris, the coach of the Dynamo squad in the Championship. So all in all, fantastic weekend. Jack Maxwell was sensational. 8 goals and 2 assists, sees him top the goal scorer charts. He was voted the unsung hero of the weekend, so congratulations to him. Russ Rigby was voted the coach of the weekend, and Lewis Harris was also present. So they had the result, and they made a real impression on everyone else within the Lee Westwood Sports Centre.
I think it's interesting you mentioned Jack Maxwell there. The patterns of play that Leeds tend to look to follow, the passing lanes they try, often result in Jack Maxwell being the one with the shooting opportunity and the goal scoring opportunity. So I'm not sure that those 8 goals are going to be a one-off weekend for Jack. I think he might be scoring a lot of Leeds goals going forward. And it's interesting that 2 and 3 in the table are West Brom players that make up 8 goals between them. So if West Brom continue to share them out, and the other teams do amongst their team, but Leeds have a focal point of Jack Maxwell that finishes off a lot of their moves, he could run away with the golden bumper at the end of the season.
Yeah, I think within that context, you also have to consider Darren Rigby. You've already mentioned him as being such a clean striker with the ball, such a fantastic overall player that's also very versatile. He's playing out wide, or certainly was in Gameweek 1. Has he got his eyes on a potential spot in the England European Championship squad? That could explain why he shifted his position, maybe looked at the current England setup and seen his best opportunity to break into that squad as being one of the wide players. So, again, really fascinating story that will unfold as the season progresses. He finished with 7 assists to complement his 2 goals. So 9 goal contributions, another fantastic weekend for him. And just for that understanding, for all of those unaware, the 24-25 Optegra Premiership will roll straight into the 2025 Epva Nations Cup. So people that want to break into Adam McAvoy's England squad will have to make an impression. He was there on Saturday overseeing the action, so would have seen Leeds beat Newcastle as well as games against Nottinghamshire and Teesside.
Certainly well done. Right. Next in the table. A familiar name. Near the top.
Yeah, familiar name indeed. West Bromwich Albion, the reigning 5-time champions of the National League Premiership. They played 4, they won 3, and they drew 1. On paper, a very favourable opener against Norwich City. An unprecedented achievement for Norwich to even be in the Premiership, having secured the 3rd promotion spot via the playoff back in July. So for West Brom, they would have been licking their lips at the prospect of opening the season against arguably the weakest team across the 12. But West Brom, a team that looks very, very different to the one that finished 23-24. 4 new signings to adapt to the 3 departures. So the new signings, Ollie Rock, Barris Innell and Lucas Christa, all from West Bromwich Albion Throstles, and they've also re-signed Brad Bates from Aspire. Obviously, the departures that of Marcus Harrison, Valentino Zegarelli and Dave Lewis. And my God, what players they are. So a serious job for their new signings to kind of pick up where they left off. But no, it was a fantastic start, 8-0, which saw Ollie Rock, Barris Innell, Lucas Christa all register on their and Brad Bates, all register goals on their debuts or second debuts for Brad Bates and Barris Innell particularly. So they got off to a flying start. Congratulations to them on that one. But they hit the ground running, and that's the kind of the pace, the momentum that they will have to maintain if they want to be crowned 6-time champions, because there's a lot more competition this year.
And football is a team game. And so great players can make up great teams, but equally great teams don't have to be made up of solely great players. Not saying that these players aren't great, but you can replace the big names with players that commit to playing in the fashion and the style that you want to. And West Brom, of all the teams, have probably got the strongest individual identity of how they play, the patterns of play, the passing lines, the shape of the team, a 4-out system that is mature and well refined and developed. And So despite knowing a lot of the time what they're looking to do, because they've got responses to your responses all the time, there's always the next phase of play, the next, if this happens, we'll do this instead with them. And so as long as they get the training in and are well drilled, they'll be able to still perform as West Brom teams over the last few years have. It's not a surprise that they're up the top. Played for 1-3, drawn 1, 13 points, 13 goal difference. That's a good returner from 4 games.
Yeah, and if you delve a little bit deeper into them results, you'll see games against Greenbank and Teesside are some of the tough teams in the divisions, the ones that will be in and around that title race. They saw off Saturday with a fairly comprehensive 4-1 victory over West Bromwich Albion and the Throstles, and then all eyes were on Sunday. They opened against Greenbank, and I didn't have the pleasure of commentating due to being on Court A at the time. It finished 0-0, and talking to people in and around the Lee Westwood Sports Centre, it was like a taste of their own medicine, coming up against Marcus Harrison, who's been amongst their ranks for so many years, been an asset to them in terms of locking up games in the dribble or being such a technical, attacking, wide, expansive player. And from the sounds of it, he just frustrated them so much. And on that, I'll bring you one of the Jeff the Ref stats for this one. Since the switch to the current 2-league format in 2011-12, only twice has a promoted team taken points off a defending champion. The second instance occurred at the weekend when Greenbank secured that point against West Bromwich Albion. Can you have any sort of guess as to when the first occurred?
So, for me, that's a difficult one. I'm going to say that I think it's probably one of 2 teams that have come up. Both are fairly northeasterly. Am I in the right area?
No.
Ooh. Okay, I'm in the right area.
I'll cut you off because you will be here all day. The reason why this stat is so fascinating is because the first time that this occurred was back in May 2013, when Bolton Bullets held Aspire to a 0-0 draw. The reason why it's so interesting is because a certain player was present in Greenbank versus West Brom at the weekend. Can you guess who that player was?
Wasn't Marcus Harrison, was it?
Marcus Harrison was present in both times in which a promoted squad has taken points off a defending champion.
That's an incredible stat. Incredible stat.
And yeah, 11 years separate them. So congratulations, Marcus. You continue to make history every time you get on the court, it seems. So yeah, Greenbank versus West Bromwich Albion, 0-0 it finished. Fantastic result for Greenbank, considering that was their first point of the season. We'll get onto them in more detail very shortly, but full credit to them. And West Brom's final game of the weekend. What a game. If anyone has 40 minutes spare, please go on the WFA's YouTube and find Teesside versus West Brom. One of the best games I've ever watched, ever had the pleasure of commentating on. West Brom came from behind twice in that first half before asserting a little bit more dominance in the second, eventually securing 3 points. What a game.
So were the goals quite late, the winning goals?
No, I don't think they were I think the fourth one was fairly late, but Chris Gordon switched it up at the halftime break. He brought Lucas Christa on for Matt Gilbert, and then they just started to assert a little bit more dominance and find their rhythm. They were a little bit shell-shocked in the first. I have to give full credit to Ed Common and the other players of Teesside for that matter. Ed was just absolutely sensational on a different planet. And it took a little bit of time for West Brom to adapt to. They eventually did. They figured out Teesside's game plan and they went on to take the 3 points, but far from a formality. And Teesside, if they consistently play like that across the 22 league season, they will be in for a shout.
So we've expanded our normal list of 2 or 3 to 4 for definite already of that are in the title race, with Leeds, West Brom, Aspire and Teesside. And we've still got a couple of clubs to talk about.
I think you've still got to consider Newcastle in that. But we will get on to them. But just on the last point on West Bromwich Albion, it's a favourable game week 2. They play Sevenoaks, Middlesbrough, Villa Rockets before another fixture with Greenbank. So on paper, you're looking at maximum points. Anything but that would surely be seen as a disappointment as they look to defend their crown.
I think there's going to be quite a lot of disappointment this season for various teams.
I agree.
And I think we're going to get to a point where we can't necessarily say on paper, just because there's going to be there's so many upsets that are now possible with the standard of play in the league, and the development teams have clearly gone through over the summer, both by recruitment and changing up who they've got in their squads, but also clearly the coaching and the hard work in training that players are putting in is really starting to show. So we're about to move on to Newcastle, and you look at the players they've got in their squad and what they're capable of, and also what they did last year and what they're doing this year. And there's huge steps and huge development, both as a team and as individuals. And Teesside, they've got some players.
How much of this is maybe as a result of the upcoming European Championships? When we're talking about West Brom, Leeds, Teesside, Newcastle, Aspire as 5 main points, and you could easily include Greenbank in that. Many of their players are currently in the England setup or have aspirations of being in the England setup. Do players increase their level when they know there's such a significant tournament coming up, or they just think that is just the professionalism that they have every time they get on the court, certainly at the top level?
I think there's a few things that have driven the progress of the sport, both on and off. I say of the sport in England. The reason that I think we're seeing bigger steps forward and progression, partly the size of our competition has got to be the biggest in the world. 24 team National League is big. 12 division Premiership, 12 division Championship. That's a good standard for National League to be at. Plus, we've got that's supported by the regional leagues underneath. So the scale of which we've managed to get our sport to in terms of participation numbers, the number of clubs we have, and the club development program that WFA run, primarily through you and Adam, that's had an impact over the years. That's developed opportunities and enabled players to find the places to play and develop and learn. And also we have to recognise, I think, that we've got some trailblazing players in our league that are implementing both new ideas, new ways of playing, pushing the envelope on what can be achieved in an attacking sense, certainly, with Powerchair. And the adoption of the England systems or prevalence of the 4 out, I would say, in our top league, is because people want to play like England and they want to be able to be in with a shout of playing for England, so they need to learn that football. But that football's come about because 1 or 2 teams have been very successful with it in our leagues. So it's been proved to be successful. So people take it on and try it and learn and develop. And it's a natural kind of evolution of football, if you want, that's come as a result of that, and that's how it's come about. But it's because players and teams are pushing each other all the time. It's that competition it's the competitive element of what we do and the desire for people to be better athletes, to be better footballers and be better teams that forces them to look at where can we gain this next margin of advantage? Where can we look at weaknesses in the teams that we're playing? What can we look to exploit next? And so the innovation comes from that competition.
Yeah.
And that's why we've got this Premiership season we've got right now, is players are, Marcus Harrison, for instance, gone to Greenbank. Part of that is he wants to have his own ideas explored as in a team scenario. So he's doing that, which is great for the sport. Teesside have got a couple of world-class England players in and amongst what they're doing. Aspire have got John Boulding. The West Brom's got Chris Gordon. Leeds Chariots with Dan Rigby and Lewis Harris pulling the strings. These are great players.
Yeah.
Newcastle with Ethan Fisher, Ollie Crawshaw, Cole Simpson. These are players that are capable of playing some phenomenal football and very high level football, international level football at their club week in, week out. And so we are really starting to see levels increase, margins of precision, margins of extra speed and accuracy. All of those are starting to come in to make a significant difference. And that's the level they're working at now, that centimetres and millimetres difference in terms of where they're passing the ball to. And their game understanding is huge compared to where it used to be. Huge. Players, would have a good level of skill. But because this modern day chairs are able to do perform and execute passes and plays and move the ball at a speed that they couldn't do before, because that's now possible, players' understanding of passing lines, of position, of what they're trying to achieve in terms of not just moving the ball, but moving their opposition out of the way, and how to do that, how to tempt the opposition to move, how to create the space and the shapes, and if they're combated, what to do instead, where there is always going to be an attacking option. And that's so exciting, so brilliant to watch, because you see something new every time. Every Premiership weekend, every team, you see something clever, innovative, different that they're trying to look at. And they've gone, okay, so teams challenging us in that way, we're going to try this and do that. And so I think the standard of football at the end of this season is going to be incredible.
I think that was evident for everyone to see across Gameweek 1. It's almost a cliche for us to say that this is the most competitive season yet. We had a conversation recapping Gameweek 1 of the Championship and said we was blown away by the quality of football at that level. And whilst it's the smallest it's ever been, there is still a significant gap between Premiership and Championship. That will come on to that later when we're talking about how the promoted teams fared, Greenbank aside. But it translates now across our streams, and the reputation of Powerchair Football is kind of intertwined with our flagship National League, and everything from the sponsors to the streaming and everything in between. I think that's all played a contributing factor to us having this leading product anywhere worldwide. You've mentioned 24 teams, a split across 2 divisions. While we're talking about 4, 5, potential 6-horse races, this is unprecedented stuff, and I really think we are leading the way, not just within Powerchair Football, but wider impairment-specific football within England, across Europe. It's just absolutely unbelievable. So I'm here for the ride, and cannot wait to see how the season unfolds. You spoke about certain players adapting their approaches and implementing their ideas when referencing the 2025 Vet for Nations Cup, which is scheduled for, I think, September next year. So there will be no National League football in between the end of this season and the start of that major competition, in which England will be defending their title, defending their crown, in which they secured in 2019. You're seeing players adapt their positions to try and force their way into the conversation. Ed Common and Dan Rigby as 2 particular ones that were predominantly central players who are now playing their football out wide to try and force the narrative. will that be a continuing factor across 24-25 when players see the England national team, they see Chris Gordon, they see John Baldwin as that predominant 1-2 pivot? Can they force themselves around the periphery of that? We will see.
And I think the other thing to say is in those top 5 teams, I know we're about to get onto Newcastle, but in those top 5 teams, if you've had any sort of major conversations with the personnel there, both players and coaches, you will know there are at least 1, often 2, sometimes 3 serious students of the game there. They study the game. They study the tactics. They study the way that other opposition play. They look at how their teammates operate, both technically, tactically. They really look to develop their understanding, get their own ideas on it. And the sport's still at an age where new ideas can come in and new thoughts and experimentations can happen. And it's really, really exciting time to be involved in that respect. And all of those teams have people with a very strong idea and philosophy on how they want Powerchair football to be played. And a lot of it is complementary, but there's some differences in there as well. And that's what makes it so intriguing. That's the intriguing bit.
Next up, in the 24-25 Optegra Premiership standings, in third we have Aspire, who share a very similar record to West Bromwich Albion. 4 games played, 3 games won, 1 game drawn, which sets them off onto a fantastic start. They're now European champions, which has a fantastic ring to it, having won the Champions League equivalent for Powerchair Football in Paris back in June. They kick-started their campaign against recently promoted Middlesbrough, so like West Bromwich Albion, a favourable start on paper, but it was far from a formality. That one only ending 3-1. Middlesbrough will be absolutely delighted with that result, but it's a big season for them, looking to bounce back, certainly when referencing their domestic football. Disappointing. They fell short of the Premiership last season, and they were also short in the WFA Cup final. So can they bounce back? Can they dethrone West Bromwich Albion, both in the Cup and the League? We will see, but they started brilliantly. 3-1 win over Middlesbrough and a 3-1 win over Greenbank. I'm excited to talk about Greenbank because I think they're going to be the great disruptors in this division. That's the title I've given them.
I think the most interesting result for Aspire over the weekend as a whole was against Newcastle. Did I see that correctly?
Yeah, 0-0 that one finished.
Yeah, so that for me points towards what I think might happen in amongst the top 4 or 5 teams across the season, which is teams will be big matches, teams turn up, players turn up, and the resulting pressure means a draw often occurs. Tight games, few chances. And I think it might be the number of draws column that we're looking at towards the end of the season, where teams finishing 2nd, 3rd and 4th might be a bit more regretful, or looking back at those results and going, just a goal there or a goal here, and that could have transformed the season and how things go. And so the fact that Newcastle Aspire was a 0-0, I think points towards that sort of game happening quite a few times over the season. Shows how tight that top 5 is.
I don't think people quite understand how much of a big thing it is for Leeds Chariots to top the table at the conclusion of game week 1. At face value, you just see Leeds Chariots, they've done well, they topped the tree, they've played a game more, but delve a little deeper into it, it's so significant in the fact that of seasons gone by, and you can go back 5-10 seasons for this, it was always a 2-horse race at one point, maybe 3 if you factor Northern Thunder into that conversation, and they would only ever drop points against one another. One of the other 9 or 10 teams getting points against them was both unheard of and unprecedented. but you're seeing it now become a reality, becoming more of a common occurrence. Newcastle United Foundation have never really been able to take that step further to challenge the top, but they are so competitive. So you're right to say the draw section may be assessed as well as the goal difference. But I think any of the top 5 or 6 teams know that when they play another within that bracket, they are in for a game, and a win is far from a formality. We've seen Newcastle be so competitive in seasons of late. People hate to play them. They're fiery, they're feisty, they're controversial, and it's proven to be exactly that case as we begin the 24-25 campaign. I didn't watch it. Newcastle should have won it from what I've heard. I think they rattled the post and missed a clear goal-scoring opportunity. If they go on and win that, the narrative in our conversation changes completely. So there's such fine margins.
I remember 2 years ago, Leeds beating Aspire 1-0, and that being such a shock result across the division. Everyone was talking about it for a couple of hours. And everyone was looking around going, is that just happened? Is that? And it was Dan Rigby really coming to the fore and maturing as a top player as well. And that shock and that awe wasn't there this weekend when there were draws with big teams and big teams was having to come back against other perceived not such big teams. So for instance, when Teesside took the lead a couple of times at West Brom, there wasn't this shock, this is unreal, and there wasn't a inevitability about the comeback either. They had to go and work for it. So the perception, I think, of all this, of the top 2 we've had before with West Brom and Aspire, and previously Northern Thunder been in that mix as well. But that I think is that gap between them is smaller than it's ever been. And that's the time when you often see John Balding step up. So it's going to be another intriguing challenge for him in his career, where he's not just fighting out against one other team. He's leading his team against 3 or 4 of them.
I was watching him across Gameweek 1, and I truly think that the levels of consistency that he produces season upon season needs to be studied. How can someone at the absolute top of their game not dip even slightly below that? If anything, it looks like he's improving. He's reading the game more. He's gaining more experience. And you're seeing it integrated within his game. And a conversation I had with him recently and listening to the Aspire podcast, I think he's really starting to appreciate the coaching side to his game. He's obviously registered as the head coach of the European champions, and he never typically liked that title. He didn't like the coaching side. He was there to be a captain, to be a leader, and kind of coaching the tactics and techniques wasn't his strong suit. But I think he's starting to appreciate that now. And you're seeing that within the other Aspires games. They brought in John Dixon, playing an unfamiliar role out wide. Already, he looks like he stepped up his level. I think Dan McClellan is the perfect case in point for a player being inexperienced to just come in, learn under John Balding, and become one of the leading players anywhere in the world. Forget England. So I think his consistency and now his coaching needs to be studied, because it's just such a fascinating story. We know John is never happy with anything other than a win, anything other than a trophy. He would have hated the fact that West Brom picked them to the post last season. So now, no doubt, that will be at the forefront of his mind as the season unfolds.
As you know, Alex's Powerchair rules number 1: never bet against John Balding. The man's a very, very talented, I don't want to use the word freak, but standout individual when it comes to reading the game, seeing the game, chair control, unreal. And I think interesting that he's starting to look at that coaching side, tactical and technical aspects of the game a bit more, potentially because of the challenge that is being presented to him in our National League. That's great for the game too. One of our biggest assets we've got as a human being, really getting involved in the development of young players and new players coming through. It's great. Really, really good.
Absolutely is. So firstly, congratulations to Aspire. Unbeaten start to the 24-25 campaign, which is exactly the way they would have wanted to start. Game week 2, more favourable on paper. They play Nottinghamshire, they play Norwich, they play Throssell's. Teesside on the Sunday afternoon will be the real test. December 14th and 15th, for all of those unaware, is game week 2 of the season. So as we progress down the table, we now come to Teesside. Of their 4 games played, they played 3, lost 1. So a good start. We've already mentioned that single defeat to West Bromwich Albion as being absolutely incredible, one that they should have got 3 points from. They'll be disappointed that they let West Brom back into it at 2 times, but overall, my team of the weekend. I just thought they played some sensational football. If you look at the fixtures on paper on Saturday against Greenbank and Leeds Chariots, they got 6 points, and they are tough opponents. Only team to get points from Leeds, who sit top of the table. So that context needs to be applied. What were your thoughts on Teesside, Al?
I thought they looked dynamic. They looked flexible. They had a number of different lineups over the weekend and a number of different systems over the weekend. And they seem to be able to adapt quickly and easily as they need to. The signing of Greg Baxter has given them the option for 4 out with Greg and Tyler, or Greg and Ed as double pivots. And Mitch Tinkler is absolutely loving his football, banging in goals all over the place, or banging in shots all over the place, and look at a real threat out there as well for them. Their shape of play, their clear understanding about what they're trying to achieve collectively. As soon as anything goes slightly wrong, the shape of the team and each individual responds as a collective. They look a very, very solid team. Very impressed with how they're operating, and of course, we've talked about teams with strong pairs and individuals and teams with a couple of really great world-class players in each of them. And they've got Tyler Reeve and Ed Common, so they're not struggling there for their top 2 players. And they've added Greg Baxter to Mitchell Tinkler, Alistair Haig, and Dylan Pearson as well. They've got a strong squad there that play some great football. So all eyes on them for the rest of the season.
Yeah, you've mentioned the world-class players in which they have, certainly within Tyler Reeve and Ed Common particularly in that defeat against West Brom was just on another planet. And the fact that they lost that and he was still forcing the narrative to be in Teesside's favour hopefully just shows how good a player he is. But I will echo what you said about Mitch Tinkler, because for me, he was one of, if not their best player across game week 1. He was absolutely brilliant, put himself in some fantastic positions. His passing, his wider distribution, his attempts on goal really helped them. He's currently on the Regional Emergent Talent Programme. No doubt he'll be progressing through the ranks fairly quickly. Can he follow in Tyler Reeve's footsteps? We saw Tyler have a fairly meteoric rise through the ranks, the NETP and now the England senior squad. He won't want to dip below that now, but it's the perfect example for Mitch to follow. Dylan Pearson was fantastic against Leeds. He was brought on in the second half and made the difference. Could have scored a hat-trick within about 10 minutes. Just the one which helped them get the 3 points over the line. And as you've already mentioned, Greg, moving from Sevenoaks, used sparingly. I don't think he's accessed training yet with with the side. So sensibly, they're just integrating him in solely. But when we did see it, as you've already mentioned, they did have a more expansive 4-out approach, which is an exciting thing to have in their arsenal if and when they want to use it. Probably against the lesser sides, we'll see it. Greg also against Norwich scored a hat-trick, which fantastic for him. The 9th of his career and the first since 2017 when Brighton beat Evergreen. So he's got goals to his game as well, which will no doubt please Owen Swift, now taking on a predominant coaching role, stepping back from his time playing. And I do want to just shine a light on Alistair Hay. Such a fantastic goalkeeper, such a calming presence for the players around him. And he just deserves credit. So fantastic weekend from them. They will be in contention. I have no doubt about it. Game week 2 is the real test. They play Newcastle, they play Greenbank, they play Aspire. And if they come through them with favourable results and points to their name, who knows where this season could go.
Indeed. Can we just drop back to the Norwich game? You mentioned Greg got a hat-trick.
Yep.
Apologies for Norwich fans listening. Ended 9-0 to Teesside.
Yep.
Scorers were Dylan Pearson, Tyler Reeve, Greg Baxter, Ed Common, Mitchell Tinkler and Alistair Hay. And that is the entire squad.
That is the entire squad. Fairly unique that a full outfit managed to register a goal. So upon reviewing this before every podcast Alex and I do, we do our due diligence, we do our notes, and it cropped up as a talking point. So I reached out to Jeff Lewis and I said, when has that been done before? It's been done 4 times. The most recent was when West Bromwich Albion beat Manchester United. Barris Innall, Chris Gordon, Brad Bates, Lewis Harris, Marcus Harrison, Matt Gilbert. 2 other times in which it was done. Northern Thunder beat Swindon Rockets back in 2012, and Northern Thunder beat Bolton Bullets back in 2016. Ed Common was present in both of them games, so he's been involved in 3 of the 4 times in which 6 players have scored. Once in the Premiership, have 7 different players scored in a single game. Any sort of guess?
It's with 7 players. It sounds like probably a West Brom scenario.
You'd have to go all the way back to 2007, so long before either of us were involved within the beautiful sport of Powerchair Football.
Okay, then either then a Thunder, Northern Thunder.
I think hopefully this helps people understand how much the sport has come on and how competitive it is now. Aspire beat Nottinghamshire 23-0 back in 2007. A certain John Bolden was amongst the scorers that day. So 7 players within their squad registered a goal. Everyone will know the legend that is Charlie Kitcher, Jack Pegram, John Bolden, Nicky Baker, Sam Ball, Spencer Kelly and Steve Pearson.
I just found that result and having a look. Crikey.
So yeah, fascinating. Another time in which 7 players scored a single goal within a result or registered a finish. In the Championship, that was Bolton Bullets beat Percy Headley Panthers 2. 17-0 back in 2011. Marcus Harrison amongst the goal scorers that day. And within that result, there was also an own goal. So in favour of Bolton Bullets, they had 8 goal scorers.
Crikey. We're getting some wonderful detailed stat trivia now. It's lovely. We will get you a jingle, Jeff, because this stuff is brilliant. So I think we're going to make some of Jeff's interesting stats and observations that he comes up with a regular part of these review pods for definite. Right then, I'm just looking at that game, 23-0. Crikey. What a game that must have been. Some interesting names. Sam Bull, of course, who went on to be National Development Manager for the WFA. So a familiar name to those of us that have been around a little while as well.
Next up in the table is Newcastle United Foundation, another team that will want to force the narrative in their favour to be potential title contenders. They're currently 5th, played for 1-2, drawn 1, lost 1, so 7 points to their name. They started, as we've already mentioned, against Leeds Chariots. They just struggled to get out of second gear in that one. Cole Simpson failed the speed test prior to the game, and as the regulations state, a player can retest at half-time to be present in the second half, but they will not be able to feature in the first, which is a real shame, because when he was introduced after successfully completing the speed test, he was absolutely brilliant. I was so intrigued to see how he fared in a more dynamic side than he's probably used to do Hull and East Yorkshire. No disrespect. Newcastle are just kind of a step up when it comes to the calibre of the play that they try and execute, the tactics they try and adopt. And I've only ever known him to play in that central role. The Hull and East Yorkshire squad was essentially built around him, being the fantastic player that he is. And now I'm seeing him out wide. Again, another player will probably want to break into the England development squad, maybe even the England senior squad in the coming years. And he's probably seen the attacking wide areas as the best opportunity to do so. Not just that, obviously the congested, talented central players that Newcastle have meant he has to settle for a position that he's not used to. But when he came on, he could have scored 2, 3, 4 goals against Leeds. And had they gone on and got some points from that, they're right up the table. There's very fine margins, as you'll see, between Newcastle United Foundation and Leeds Chariots. There is 5 points. Take the game in hand off Leeds' game, that would put them on 9. 3 points would separate 1st and 5th. And
again, that, like you say, there was chances to score goals against Leeds, and if they'd have either got a point or 3 points, that puts 3 teams on 10 points, no matter what. So if they'd have got a point off Leeds, then the top 3 teams are all on 10 points. If they got 3 points off Leeds, the top 3 teams would all be on 10 points, and Newcastle will be one of them. So, that's all of a sudden that's a very different looking table with that one result, and that's where I think that draw column, and potentially for a couple of teams like Newcastle that loss column is going to be ones that can really change the shape of the table and the picture of the table as the season goes on. It will be very interesting by the end of the season where the small regrets are.
Yeah, and I think they did regret that game, but they bounced back with a vengeance against Sevenoaks. 5-0 it finished. It was one of the more one-sided games we had across Gameweek 1. Ethan Fisher hat-trick. For anyone who's a regular listen of the 2-on-1 Powerchair Football podcast will know that I predicted Ethan Fisher as my player of the season. So a fantastic game for him. Ollie Crawshaw and Sam Smith with the other goals. Sunday morning, 3-0 victory over Villa Rockets. Both myself and Dean Williams were calling the action on that one. Cole Simpson registering his first goal for his new side, which is only his 2nd ever Premiership goal as 1 point. He has 42 Championship goals to his name, but if you encapsulate the WFA Cup finishes as well, that's his 50th career goal. So congratulations to Cole Simpson. Really exciting opening weekend. and a story to watch as the season unfolds.
It certainly is. I think I saw Jamie Harrison, coach of Newcastle, go through quite a range of emotions on the sidelines over the course of the weekend, from frustration to elation at different points. So again, we talk about students of the game, and I think Jamie is one of those.
Yeah, absolutely. We've already mentioned the 0-0 against Aspire, in which they could have got 3 points. So you look at the games in which Newcastle have dropped points against Leeds Chariots and Aspire. They could have very easily gone on to secure wins in both of them. And then the conversation is very different once again. So intrigued to see as the season unfolds. Game week 2 for them, really tough. Consecutive games against Greenbank, against Teesside, against Leeds Chariots. And it was a conversation I had with many people across the weekend. You're going to want to play Greenbank as early as possible in the season, because they're starting to connect as a collective. And once they unlock that formula and then them tactics, they will be a formidable team. So game week 2 could even be too late, because towards the latter stages of game week 1, Greenbank were hitting a different level.
I totally agree. I think Greenbank are going to grow through the season. We talked in our pre-season predictions that there's a question on how quickly they'll settle, and I think they've settled. I think they're there. I think they've kind of got to where they've got to. So the timing on which you get to play a team such as Greenbank, and to an extent some of the newer teams that are coming up as well, Middlesbrough as well, I think will dictate how well you get on against them.
Next in the table, we have Villa Rockets. They have played 5, they have won 2, they have lost 3, having 6 points to their names. Like their championship counterparts in Villa, Rockets, Lions, fairly probably underwhelming start to the season compared to expectations. Like many across the Premiership division. And just for context, I've tallied it up to have 18 different signings across the 12 teams, which, if you pair with the 15 signings made across the Championship divisions, that's 33 players moving up, moving down, moving across. So we've referenced it many times in the Championship review, how many will have a new look, a new feel, new tactical approach, new coaches, which has to be factored into the conversation. They've brought in Dave Lewis, they've brought in Bobby Allen, 2 fantastic players, but Villa Rockets are seen as a very difficult, stubborn team to beat, but you wouldn't necessarily say there was an attacking, expansive, exciting team. They're very conservative. They were hard to beat. They're hard to score against. But I think that narrative is switching now, and they try to go for it in game week 1. They had a favourable start against Middlesbrough, but in the shock result of the weekend, Middlesbrough went on to secure 3 points in a comprehensive 2-0 victory. Very shocking.
I think the combination of new players and potentially new style of play for Villa Rockets took them a little while to settle in. Obviously, they've as much as they signed Dave Lewis and Bobby Allen, they've lost Dan Kay, so it was a major part of their team setup. So a bit of change there for Villa Rockets, and it's taken a little bit of time to adjust. I would say they've got some talented players there. Certainly looking towards the future in terms of Summer Ice, Bobby Allen, as we mentioned, Dave Lewis and Hamza Madeira, all good, solid players. And so there's reasons to be optimistic for Villa Rockets, but like I say, potentially they're a little bit different. They're a slightly different approach compared to some of the teams who are very much let's go and attack and attack and attack. They look to be as solid as they possibly can to start with, and be a tough team to beat. And we'll see how that season unfolds for them as a result.
Yeah, I think we have to give them this season as kind of a grace period for them to adapt to the new field, the new system. They have seasoned England internationals, both current and former. When you're looking at Amir Ali, when you're looking at Dave Lewis, you've already mentioned the youth and being so exciting on that topic in their 3-0 victory over Norwich City. Following that disappointing defeat, Bobby Allen registered a brace which matches his entire Premiership goal tally in the season he played with Nomad Knight, so congratulations to him. He has 38 Championship goals, and a congratulations as well from us for Hamza Madir and Bobby Allen. They've recently enrolled in the National Emergent Talent Programme, having been promoted up from the regional programme. I remember in our prediction episode for the Premiership, we stated our team to watch and our player to watch. For team to watch, I selected Villa Rockets because I think if they can get that formula right, they can trouble anyone. They were slightly disappointing in some of the games across Gameweek 1, but still a long season ahead. I also selected Hamza Madir. And the reason I selected Hamza Madir as my player to watch is that I wanted to see him in an attacking wide position, or maybe the central position. Of seasons of late, he's been used as the most defensive of the four as the goalkeeper. But when he did feature across Gameweek 1, it was the shackles were off. It was attacking wide, which I've been crying out for. So fantastic to see. He'll take time to get up to speed in what that sort of position entails. But it's compelling viewing, and hopefully they can go back to the drawing board, extrapolate the successes from Game Week 1 and apply them to Game Week 2. When we're referencing Game Week 2, I say tough fixtures. Oh, you've got some tough fixtures on paper. There is no easy fixtures in this division. So they play Throssels, they play Sevenoaks, Newcastle and West Brom. If you're going to want, I'm not quite sure what their aspirations are for the season ahead, whether it's challenging towards the top, securing Premiership safety, who knows. But they're going to have to take points at any and every opportunity possible if they're going to try and force the narrative. And we will see December 14th and 15th.
Exciting, looking forward to that weekend. Right, next.
Before you go on to the next section, I think your Power Hair segment of the 2-on-1 Powerchair Football podcast needs a shout out. Summer Rice had a fantastic...
Indeed, yes. I'd spotted Summer over the weekend as well.
Yeah, she had a fantastic orange hairdo, so I think she has to be enrolled along with some of the Championship players that we referenced a few weeks ago.
Summer went autumnal is the headline for that one.
Yeah, and just another quick thing on Villa Rockets. I think because they're going to be playing potentially a more expansive attacking form of football, the losses are more possible than seasons of late. They're going to be more open whilst they're experimented and finding their feet within that. We've always known them to have a real strong defensive stance, and if you deviate from that, there is going to be vulnerabilities. So hopefully they get it right. Another one, Dave Lewis, we have to say, he's a die-hard Birmingham fan, and he's adorning the claret and blue of Aston Villa. That's not a great look. But he scored across Game Week 1, which is his 129th goal in the Premiership, which puts him up to 10th in the overall standings. So congratulations to him. If he scores another goal, he will overtake Villa Rockets legend Dan Kay in the standings to be the 9th all-time top goal scorer.
Wow. We ought to do a rundown of top 10. That's for the next pod. We won't do that now. Let's do a rundown next pod of top 10 goals.
I think we'll weave that into the episode in which we have Jeff the Ref on, because we need a stats episode. People love the segments in which we bring these little nuggets out. So we'll add a little bit more detail around that when it's set to be released, because we want some sort of audience reactions and interactions.
If you've got any stats questions for Jeff, send them in. We can have them ready for him when he gets into our Stats Jeff the Ref pod episode. So any stats questions or questions you want to know the answers to around the history of the game and its results, send them in.
Absolutely. So next in the table, Greenbank.
Now, if you said at the start of a season, a promoted team on their opening weekend is going to play West Bromwich Albion Throssels, managed by Colin Gordon, West Bromwich Albion, Aspire and Teesside in their first 4 games, you wouldn't really give them much chance of a point. Maybe a point. But other than that, you're going to struggle. To get 4 points from those fixtures is incredible. That is incredible. Teams finishing 3rd in previous seasons would have been very chuffed with those results.
Can I just say, what a team Greenbank are. I've already said that they could be the great disruptors. They could be more than that. Do not be fooled by their placement of 7th. You've already referenced the opposition in which they're faced. And they probably were looking at it on paper, despite believing in their own ability. Any team that has to face West Brom, Aspire and Teesside, who most people widely consider as the top 3 teams in the country, it's fairly bleak viewing at face value. But they were competitive in every single game. It was a narrow 2-1 defeat to Teesside. It was a 3-1 defeat to Aspire. They took a 1-0 lead into that one. They changed their approach, which probably shows a little bit of naivety and lack of experience in terms of how to adapt and face the top opponents. Anyone that gets a second, please watch Marcus Harrison's goal. Absolutely incredible. Will almost certainly feature as a member of the shortlist for goal of the season at our end of season awards. But Greenbank frustrated Aspire, and whilst they come away with the 3 points, yellow cards were picked up by John Boldy and Dan McClellan, so it shows there was a psychological battle there as well as it was physical, technical, tactical. But they're amazing. I've already said you're going to want to catch them early, because even as the weekend unfolded and progressed, they got better and better and better. We have to dedicate a few minutes to Marcus Harrison. You've mentioned how he moved to Greenbank, and it's a brave move. Greenbank, whilst they're very much on the up, cannot be considered in the same conversation as West Bromwich Albion in terms of the Powerchair Football history books. You're referencing one of the best forces in Powerchair Football history worldwide in West Brom, and an up-and-coming exciting team in Greenbank. And to make that move from such a dominant side to a team that's just got promoted, not only is a risk in itself, it also has potential implications on his England career, because so many things are considered and factored in when you look at the England setup, and where and how you play your club football plays a key role in that.
He's just been incredible, hasn't he? For the last 2 or 3 seasons, he's played some of the most impressive, dominant Powerchair football I've ever seen. I've always said he's one of the best wingers in the world, but actually he's just one of the best players. His middle and centre pivot play now is up there with some of the best. He's always been a nightmare to play against. He's always been extremely aggressive. He doesn't necessarily look it because he's quite a slight lad, sat in his chair, but actually he's very strong and pushes hard. And he's I wouldn't want to call them the dark arts, but he's more than capable of being being very psychologically strong, shall we say, within games and up against players. And what he's doing at Greenbank and what he did this weekend was incredible. He led from the front. He's clearly well loved by the young up and coming players they've got at Greenbank, and they're responding well and gelling really nicely as a team. And he's got a great foil in Luke Kelly with him, who's providing that extra little bit of experience, just tucked in behind a lot of the time, helping make those smart decisions, quick decisions that pay off in crucial moments. And they look great. They look a great side to watch. And yeah, just sensational. False position, I think, Sam.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. He's just world class, Marcus. He can lock it up on the dribble, frustrate you, but also switch it up in a second to play that expansive technical football. I don't think anyone else in the world can do that. Maybe Momo Galami. But beyond that, what he can do and how well he can do it is so unique. I mentioned that he gave West Brom a taste of their own medicine, and they must have hated playing against it. But they've had him within their ranks for so many years, so they just didn't know how to adapt with it. And that point, being the first point of the weekend and their season, absolutely fantastic. I want to take a few seconds to talk about Jacob Bookplaat, and this is where I'm going to put my neck on the line. He's going to be 14 in November, which he's competing at the top level with top players at 13 years of age. In itself is a story, but he's holding his own, if not getting the better of seasoned England internationals across Gameweek 1. Jake, this is my prediction. Jacob Bookplaat will be in the 2026 Fit for Powerchair Football World Cup England squad.
Wow.
He will.
That's a big call.
He will be in that squad. I'm telling you now, he is sensational. And by the time the 2026 Fit for Powerchair Football World Cup comes along, he will be just shy of 16, I believe. And from what I saw in Game Week 1, which is his first ever Premiership weekend, was enough to show me that he has all of the attributes to go to the very, very top. It wasn't a doubt. I never doubted his technical or tactical ability. When you're a player of that age coming into the Premiership, it's the psychological, the mental, the emotional side of the game that I wanted to really assess. But even when he was battling away with the Dylan Kelsells, with the John Boldens, with the Chris Gordons, it didn't seem to faze him. And I can see aspects in his game that have come directly from Marcus Harrison. We often reference Dan McClellan learning from John Bolden. Jacob Bookplaat is doing the exact same from Marcus Harrison. So Marcus's move to Greenbank, I think, will have a greater impact on Jacob's career than any other defining season, moment, fixture. And he must be delighted that he has a player such as Marcus to learn from each and every day.
Bold prediction, but let's be honest, no pressure, Jacob. Keep playing your football. Don't pay attention to us.
I should caveat it that there isn't an expectation for you to be there. From what I saw, I was just beyond impressed, and that's the main statement I want to get across. So impressed with what I saw, and already I cannot wait to see him as in future games and fixture weekends in the Premiership, in the Cup competitions. I did dub him as my young player of the season in our recent podcast, and I wouldn't change that even if you allowed me to.
Right then, moving on down the table, we are on to Nottinghamshire AFC, finishing 8th after the game week M1. Played 5, won 1, drawn 1, lost 3. -5 goal difference, 4 points on the board. I should say 7th to 10th all have 4 points. So the -5 goal difference puts him behind Greenbank, but above West Bromwich Albion, Throssels and Sevenoaks, who are on the same points. They have played a game more than Greenbank and Sevenoaks, but have played the same number of games, at 5, as West Bromwich Albion, Throssels. So, well out of the danger zone at the moment. I say well out, only by a point, but by a few places. And probably the sort of start we probably expect from Nottinghamshire, in terms of not necessarily threatening everybody, but certainly taking, good enough to take some points off 2 or 3 of the teams, or 4 or 5 of the teams that we've got in the Premiership this year, and looking pretty solid across their results. Nothing jumping out as massively alarming in terms of losses. Goals that they've conceded against some good sides. And so, overall, you'd say pretty decent weekend?
I would. I had the pleasure of watching them many times on commentary, and you talk about false positions. I think Nottingham are in a false position. They had a favourable fixture list, but in the 1-0 defeat to West Bromwich Albion Throssels to kick-start the season, Throssels took a fairly early lead and then took their foot off the gas completely, and Nottinghamshire grew in confidence, in stature, in attacking presence. Could have won, should have won. That's a question for them. Take the Leeds Chariots defeat out of it, in which they won 4-0. You've already mentioned it. Close, compact fixtures and results. The Sunday, after losing 3 games from 3 on Saturday, could have been disastrous. If they come away, or they took that sort of frame of mind and that lack of momentum, therefore, into the games against Sevenoaks and Middlesbrough, we're having a very different conversation, because as the fixtures lay, there's very few weekends that will be that kind to them. The game against Sevenoaks, while Sevenoaks were the better of the 2 teams, Nottinghamshire had some clear goal-scoring opportunities late on. Could have, should have won, who knows. And then it was the last game against Middlesbrough, in which they dug in. It was a long grueling weekend, it must be said. They had 5 fixtures. On the Saturday, they played the first game and the last game. On the Sunday, they played the third game and the last game. So towards the latter stages in that Middlesbrough game, there was battery-related issues. There was fatigue. The stakes were high, but they managed to get the 3 points over the line. Leighton G providing the goal, the single goal in which they scored across Gameweek 1. So congratulations to him. The big story on commentary was the acquisition and the performances of Sean Donoghue, Republic of Ireland international, who's come over to compete in the Optegra Premiership alongside his brother Thomas, who represents Norwich. But it's about taking their chances, and the results could have gone in their favour or been more comprehensive had they been more clinical in front of goal. So if they can get that right, I think they'll be okay. But as already mentioned, it was a very favourable fixture list. They're playing teams that will be struggling towards the bottom of the table. Beyond Leeds, none of them would be considered as title contenders. And when we're talking about potentially 5-6 teams, that's half the division that will be in contention for the top placements. So when you're playing Middlesbrough, you're playing Sevenoaks, you're playing Throssels, you need to take points, because they don't come around very often. In game week 2, they play Aspire, they play Greenbank, they play Teesside in consecutive games. So on paper, you're thinking if they get any points from that, that'll be seen as a huge bonus. There's no question about it. Adam Langley starting his first National League season in over 2 years, which is fantastic to see, having many absences across the last 2 seasons. So he's starting to re-establish that connection with his brother. One thing I will say is the core of this squad is the same squad that finished 4th in the 21-22 campaign. and they were only pipped to the post by Northern Thunder in the final weekend. So take that out of consideration. That this was a team that's comfortably towards the top rather than the bottom. Matthew Hadfield, Sam Langley, Adam Langley were all key components of that squad, and they're all still present. They've added quality, if anything, to this season with the acquisitions of Sean Donoghue, Leighton G and Kieran Wade. So they've got the personnel. Can they adapt to the competitiveness of the Premiership now? We will see across the 5 weekends, but a false position, I would say, after game week 1.
I tend to agree to an extent. I also want to say I think the standard at the top's gone up as well, and certainly the below the top 2 or 3 as well. So they're very talented and they've finished high before. I think they've got to really work hard and push themselves even more if they want to keep in that position. Because I don't think it's a static position. I think that the standard in the league is going up and up and up. Right. 9th in the Premiership table after game weekend 1. West Bromwich Albion Throstles. Probably the most important new signing for them would be that of coach Colin Gordon, coming in from previously managing England to manage the Throstles team. Large than life character with very clear ideas about football and how he wants it played. And a challenging first weekend for them. I know they hadn't managed to get together training-wise for various reasons many times before the opening weekend. So still got plenty of time to embed new ideas, embed fundamentals and principles of play. But finishing 9th, tough weekend.
Very tough weekend, grueling 5-fixture weekend. I was watching them on commentary for their opener against Nottinghamshire, and the first 20 minutes they just blew me away. You were seeing elements of the England-esque 4-out DNA implemented within their game, and I thought this could be a real season for West Bromwich Albion and Throstles. They took the lead, brilliantly so, and then they just took their foot off the gas in the second. They just didn't pursue any further goals or inflict any further damage, which just allowed the opposition to grow in confidence. It's a very different feel, look, tactics. You said he's very stubborn, and I mean that in a good way in terms of he wants football to be played a certain way, but he kind of needs the personnel to do that effectively. He's coached the best players in the world at England senior level. And to do the Throstle squad no discredit, they're not quite at that level yet. They're a young, developing squad that will have aspirations of reaching that one day. But only 2 players from the squad that finished 23-24 were present in the opening weekend, that in Jonathan Davis and Amy Wharton. The other 4 that comprised their squads in Amy Lee Julian, Abigail Bolt, Regan Kemp and Matty Harrison, all brought in from various clubs across the country. So it's a steep learning curve for all of their players to adapt to a new system, to new players, to new positions, let alone the expectations that are placed upon their shoulders via Collins. So it was a tough weekend. Playing Greenbank, playing West Bromwich Albion, they'll look at that Norwich game, potentially maybe even that Sevenoaks games in which they should have won. We'll get onto Norwich shortly, but I think you was commentating 4 consecutive penalties saved by Regan Kemp. I know it was the referee bringing it back due to Regan Kemp moving prior to the ball being kicked.
As I say, so that game was interesting for a number of reasons, not least that the penalty rule in the WFA National League differs slightly from the international laws of the game. In the international laws, the goalkeeper is able to sit sideways behind the line and move constantly before the ball is struck. After discussion with our players and consultation with coaches and players and teams, we voted to change that law or have a different interpretation of that law, so that for penalties in the English National League, you can goalkeeper can sit sideways behind the line, but they can't move until the ball is struck. And I think Colin, coming from international football into our National League, wasn't necessarily aware of that at the time which the penalty was given. And subsequently, Regan Kemp kept moving, and so the penalty was retaken a number of times. So there's a question for Jeff. We don't record that information, so it's interesting if he knows of any other time a penalty has been retaken 3 times after the original one. Second question for Jeff. West Bromwich Albion started that game with the side or the lineup of Jonathan Davis in goal, Amy Lou Lee Julian in the centre, Abigail Bolt and Amy Wharton on the wing. So the first time I'm aware of 3 outfield players all being female in the National League, which is excellent to see and noteworthy. So I thought I'd mention that.
No, absolutely fantastic stat that, and full credit to West Bromwich Albion and Throssels. They're leading the way. I think comfortably the largest percentage of female participants within their match squad, which is a target I want to set other teams to beat going forward. I know Aspire have 2, Greenbank have 2, but in terms of 3 outfield female players, that's fairly unheard of, certainly at Premiership level. So full credit. And just on the topic, I thought Abigail Bolt was great. She's a fantastic learner, listener. It's the challenge to her is to implement the instructions that are given to her. She plays out wide. She has a fantastic touch, and as already mentioned, in that opener against Nottinghamshire, I was seeing some real elements within her game that I've no doubt come from Colin and being in and around the West Bromwich Albion hub. Amy Lee Julian, I regarded as one of the standout players of the last 2-3 seasons in the Championship. It's a big step up for her. So we'll give her a little bit of time to bed in and get used to the increase in pace. And overall, when you're looking at all of their players, they're all adopting a new feel, a new system, a new position. Jonathan Davis was playing in the centre when I watched him, which is he's unfamiliar with that role. Regan Kemp was the goalkeeper when we saw him feature for Nomad Knights last season. He was kind of the main central pivot centre player. So a lot of learning to be done ahead of Game Week 2. Tough weekend. They play Aspire and Leeds within Game Week 2. So can they go back to the drawing board and figure out a way to attack this league?
Indeed. And I think that's the interesting thing for Throssels will be to watch their development and watch their implementation of Colin's ideas across the season and see how they get on there. Also, just to add in on the bigging up the female members of our community and their achievements in our sport. That game also featured 2 female match officials out of the 3 as well. So excellent representation for our female athletes in that game. Good stuff to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for highlighting that. In 10th, we have Sevenoaks, played for 1-1, drew 1, lost 2, so 4 points. Just for a little bit of context, as our National League operates, the Premiership, the 12-team Premiership will see the 11th and 12th positions be automatically relegated at the conclusion of Game Week 5. Whoever stays in 10th will play whoever finishes 3rd in the 24-25 Optegra Championship. So if and where possible, teams will want to avoid 10th as well. As we saw back in July, Norwich City were victorious from the Championship side of that draw. So Sevenoaks going to want to claw their way up. You've already mentioned from 7th down to 10th all on 4 points. So it shows how closely contested it is towards the bottom as well as the top. I did watch them many times, and had they got 3 points over the line against Nottinghamshire in their final game, we're having a very different conversation. They would have secured 6 points from a possible 12 in a weekend in which they faced Aspire and Newcastle United Foundation. Did you get to watch them at all, Al?
I only saw about 10 minutes of Sevenoaks for various reasons. Often I was either commentating or entering data for matches on the other pitch that they were on. Sometimes that's just how it goes, and you don't get to see a team. But I had a little chat with their players. They seemed in good spirits. They seemed like they'd stepped up a little bit in terms of responsibility. Obviously, Adam McAvoy taking on the England role means he's stepped away from any coaching responsibilities at Sevenoaks. And although I know he'll be a big fan because they're his players, a lot of the responsibility's gone on to the players themselves. They're now at an age and understanding where their coaching and their implementation for training and stuff will be significant. I think Miles Miller's leading the way from the players' point of view on that. So there's a little bit of adaptation for them to do, but it's evolution, not change as such. And I think they're going to be okay. They sound like they're confident enough in that division and happy with how their football's going, that they'll be all right, and they will find themselves higher up the table in future weekends.
Yeah, despite the challenges, I thought they were absolutely brilliant, and they played some really nice technical football and another false position maybe. James Mason, a real presence, communicator in defence. Miles Miller, a really good technician out wide. One of the best at controlling the ball, always stays in reverse, which aids his visibility. It's the decision making and the decisiveness that probably let him down, maybe needed to react quicker to the situations that were unfolding around him. But there's definitely green shoots. The new coaches will come in. As you've already mentioned, Miles Miller is going to take the responsibilities on board. And it's just how they adapt to the departures of Greg Baxter, who was such a key player within their squad, and Adam McAvoy, as already mentioned.
Indeed, I think there's plenty for them to be happy about, and not panicking yet. But certainly I want to see some of those results improve in the future.
Absolutely. So our penultimate team in the 2024-25 Optegra Premiership is that of Middlesbrough, promoted to the Premiership for the first time since 2019. What a start. Villa Rockets 0, Middlesbrough 2. What a game, what a result, what a way to start their season.
I know they enjoyed the Saturday immensely, and they're a little bit disappointed right with the last game of their weekend. But beating Villa Rockets 2-0 and then followed up with a loss of 3-1 to Aspire made them feel very much like they were where they belonged. They celebrated their goals. They celebrated their good play. Always positive attitude. If they let a goal in, I saw Kaz Bean on the side of the pitch and coaching. She's got a young team, full of encouragement, saying not to worry, that's not a problem. No one's fault. They're just a good team. Let's go and do our thing. And the attitude in which they approached the Saturday and the Sunday was fantastic and really, really good. I think they can take loads away from that weekend in terms of confidence, belief, and enjoyment as well. I think they enjoyed a lot of the football.
Yeah, I think the context needs to be applied as well. Only Kath McNichol within their squad has ever played Premiership football before. If you take her out of the squad, the average age is 16 years old. So it shows how young their
Wow.
squad is, competing in the Premiership for the first time. I want to give full credit to both Caroline Goldsborough and Kath Goldsborough for the group that they've nurtured and developed, the players that are enjoying their football, they're enjoying the experience of competing with the best players in the world. And we've already cited that the Premiership, as well as its strategical, technical, tactical side, there is an emotional, there is a psychological element that has to be considered. That's why we do so much work around the safeguarding of players and the well-being of individuals, because coming to the division, that comes with expectation that they wouldn't be used to, but they adapted brilliantly. They played with smiles on their faces, and I can't wait to see how they fare across the remaining weekends. James Found, I thought, was absolutely sensational. He's like the silent assassin. He reminds me a lot in terms of his demeanour and how calm he stays, like Ed Common. And if he can start to weave the technical side into his game, which he can do very well, he will be a real player in the years to come. In that 2-0 victory over Villa Rockets, it was a brace from Thomas Pettigrew, who's recently signed from Sale United. Only the third ever Scotsman to play in the Premiership. He scored 3 goals across Gameweek 1 of the 24-25 campaign, which matches his entire goal tally from last season in the Championship.
Yeah, I think he's been going to be a good signing for them. He's got quite a few goals in the various places he's played, including internationally. So he's certainly going to be able to add goals to them, is Thomas. And then, like you say, the overall approach of Middlesbrough, alongside the fact that they are a young team and therefore learning and developing all the time, means that the future's bright. There's lots of potential for growth. There's loads of spare headroom for their development and to get better. So this weekend we'll have said to them, right, we can stay up. We can definitely stay up. It's a long season, and although they find themselves currently in the bottom 2, 3 points on the board after one weekend for a newly promoted team is excellent stuff. Can't go wrong there, I think.
I agree. And that makes me reluctant to read out the fixtures in Game Week 2 for Middlesbrough, because in a 4-game weekend, they play their fierce rivals Teesside before West Brom, Newcastle and Leeds Chariots. So if you're Middlesbrough, you're the coach, you're a player, you're a parent, you get a single point from Game Week 2, that's surely seen as a success.
Totally agree. Right, on to bottom place in the table, 12th position. Another of the newly promoted sides, Norwich City PFC, came up via the playoffs. Played 4, drawn 1, lost 3, minus 20 points. 20 goals, 1 point on the board. And you've got to say, even just having a point on the board is good for a newly promoted side. Certainly one that came out via the playoffs. Like we say, there's a bit of a gulf in speed and quality between the Premiership and the Championship. It's getting closer, but that's also in the context of the Premiership getting better. The Championship is also getting better, but that gap's still there. And Norwich had a torrid weekend, but eventually tweaking around and moving around, they did find themselves a slightly more solid setup for players, with Joanne George getting into goal, with Thomas Donner, new signing from Ireland, taken up in the middle, and Henry Barnard and Jack Fulcher out wide for them. That lineup seemed to add a bit of solidity to their defence, and Thomas and Joe seem to be under better understanding of each other's games than other lineups had. So that resulted in a bit more strength and a bit more solidity. They were 7-0 down at half-time against Teesside when they made that switch and lost the second half by 2-0. And then they went on to play West Bromwich Albion Throssels and got themselves a point with a 0-0 draw. So they certainly added some defensive solidity to their setup as a result of those changes.
Yeah, I think we've already mentioned that it's an unprecedented achievement that they're even here competing in the Premiership, coming up via that playoff, which hasn't been done in over 10 years. So that in itself is an achievement. They need to take this as kind of a bonus year of competing against the best teams, the best players, and enjoy the experience. Facing reigning champions, West Bromwich Albion, in the opening game is far from ideal. No one wants that, whether you're a team that's come up through the playoff or you're an Aspire, you're a Teesside. Everyone wants to get a little bit of football under their belts before they play them real big games. And the first game in any weekend, let alone the first of the season, is always kind of referred to as a bogey game. There's a bit of rust that needs to be coaxed out of players in the early morning fixtures. That's why you'll typically always see them fare better in the afternoon. So that needs to be factored in. We've already spoken about the point in which they did secure against West Bromwich Albion Throssels being one in which they could have gone on to win. If Thomas Donoghue scores that penalty and they secure 3 points, a very different conversation. Once again, it's a reoccurring thing when we're referencing teams and players and positions in the table. Young player of the season of the Championship, Henry Barnard, got his first taste of Premiership football. So congratulations to him. Jack Fulcher, as you've already mentioned, another player coming through the ranks with the Canaries. But if I could give them any advice, I would just say enjoy the experience. There is no expectations on your shoulders. Come and enjoy the experience. And if you manage to secure points along the way, great. That's seen as a bonus. One thing that could have aided their performances or supported them across the weekend would have been Mike Coleman, the only player amongst their ranks with Premiership experience. He was absent. So add him to the mix in game week 2 when they're playing Throssels, when they're playing Greenbank potentially. They'll look to be a little bit more competitive, but nobody expects them to really come and blow opposition away because it's amazing that they're even here.
Certainly is, but I think they did themselves proud in the sense that they got elements of control within games, and certainly against Throssels they started to create some opportunities as well. So they can look to pick up points against specific teams in the league, and you never know where that might lead them. Other teams have got to do the same to do better than them. So enjoy it, work hard, concentrate on the positives, and try and play your own football.
Yeah, I looked at the Premiership standings for the last 10 years just to look at how many points on average would have been enough to secure the playoff position. So 11th and 12th automatically relegated. On average, what does a team need to acquire? How many points does a team need to acquire across the 22 league games to force themselves into either safety or that playoff position? How many do you think?
Safety or playoff? I'm going to go as low as 12.
Pretty much spot on. 13 points across the last 10 on average has been enough to get you into that playoff position. So if you're Norwich, across the 22 league games, or the 18 remaining, if you can get to 13, or thereabouts, you'll be in with a shout of survival.
Interesting, because currently the teams that are in playoff position are Sevenoaks and the 3 teams above them. If they keep this average up across the 5 game weekends, they'll end up with 20 points. This could be a very, very interesting season.
Absolutely, it will. Thank you to all that have listened and followed the 2-on-1 Powerchair Football podcast. We will no doubt be back shortly with a guest or a feature. And for that, if you have any ideas, topics you'd like us to cover, or questions for an upcoming episode, we'd love to hear from you, whether it's feedback or if you're interested in joining myself and Alex. Don't hesitate to get in touch, and you can do so by sending an email to 2on1@thewfa.org.uk, and all details can also be found on our website at www.thewfa.org.uk/podcast. Thank you all.